We are talking The Curse of Audrey Earnshaw, which is also known as The Ballad of Audrey Earnshaw. And this one is written and directed by Thomas Robert Lee, and is a slow-moving psychological horror, and it tries to, I think, ape the style of The Witch, if you know what I mean. That kind of slow burn, kind of slightly occult kind of horror movie. And it actually focuses on this sort of community, this kind of almost like Amish community. They're not Amish, they're kind of like Irish kind of sort of settlers. But it actually takes place in the 1970s. But they kind of, their society is almost old-fashioned and kind of almost looks like it's 100 years ago. I mean, why not just said it 100 years ago? I don't know, but because the time frame really doesn't have a huge amount of impact on the story. But regardless, it's kind of like this very kind of rural community, very kind of obviously into their religion and very, you know, the word of God, all of this sort of thing. And we have this small community, and there is this woman who has this kind of teenage daughter that she has sort of kept a secret, and we learn ultimately that they are involved in some type of witchcraft, or at least that is the rumour, and obviously all the townsfolk are somewhat afraid and kind of have trepidation towards them. The mother actually kind of pretends that the daughter has died and is no longer there, and kind of hides her. And then there is sort of conflict between this kind of the mother and some people from the village, and ultimately this escalates into a kind of a conflict where the powers of darkness will reap a bloody revenge, is all I'll kind of say. So let's talk about first of all what works. But I guess we should really start by saying this is going to be a film for a certain type of audience. This is not going to be a lot of people's tastes, because this film does have some very well made moments to it, but I feel it is a movie that will be very divisive. Now, if you have seen The Witch that stars Aaron Taylor-Joy, I would suppose that is the kind of the nearest comparison here, and I actually think it's probably a fairly big influence on this movie. The film is more about drama and kind of psychological horror and paranoia and things like this, and how people put their faith in God without question, stuff like this. So it tries to ask some questions and things like this, but it is not a film where it is reliant on kind of gore, jump scares, horror imagery, things like this. There is some supernatural elements that take place, and there are things like, you know, plague type afflictions that happen to this kind of village, like the crops dying, animals being mutilated, things like this. There are a couple of horror, you know, few instances here where we do have kind of this horror imagery, but it's kind of few and far between, to be quite honest. Now, the actual film itself, I think, is a very well-made film. Writer-director, I think from a directorial point of view, this movie has got some strong directorial choices. I also have to say, I think the look of the film is fantastic. I'm not quite sure why they decided to set it in the 1970s and not have more of a historic period piece, because I say, outside of one scene where an aeroplane flies overhead, you would not really know that it takes place, you know, 50 years ago or less than that. But you know, other than that, it feels very kind of old-fashioned, and I think the set design, the location, the costuming, all looks very good and kind of rustic is the best way I would kind of describe it. The acting, I think, is excellent, and that when we do see scenes that kind of do veer more into the kind of the horror territory, things like the animals being mutilated, you know, it's done to a high standard. So I think on technical terms here, this is a solidly made film. It's well directed, well acted, and I think it's well shot, great music and things like this. You might be suspecting there might be a butt coming, and there is. I feel the writer-director here strength is in directing, maybe not writing, because that's where the problems are in this film. Now, the movie seems quite self-indulgent in the fact that it almost seems the director knows specifically what he wants to make without thinking how accessible this movie is going to be for people outside of the production. Because to be honest, the movie feels like it never really goes anywhere. That there's very little plot development within the movie, and the plot that we do have feels very muddled, and you feel like you're coming into a movie where you've missed half of it because kind of the status quo is already kind of set up with certain characters, and you're sort of coming in almost halfway through the story is what it kind of feels like. And then when we have our various kind of relationships and we learn a little bit more, we feel like we're only getting half the story. So unfortunately, this movie feels particularly kind of muddled. And also because I feel the writing isn't engaging in that respect, you tend to kind of lose a little bit of interest. You're not fully invested in this movie because you don't really kind of know what is going on. You're thinking, have I missed something? I feel like I've missed something, and that's the whole thing with this movie. Maybe that was the filmmaker's intention here, to kind of like throw its viewers off kind of balance and thinking this is kind of a strange kind of mix. And they succeeded in that, but in doing so, you've kind of alienated people from getting invested in a film. The film just doesn't really seem to go anywhere, if I'm honest. I mean, we do have... It does come to somewhat of a kind of a climax in regards to, you know, some horror imagery and things like that, but I never really thought the plot was particularly kind of strong here. So the movie, like I say, is a good movie in terms of its technical side of stuff. The art of filmmaking in its technical side is very well done here. But the storytelling element is what is missing. And unfortunately, this movie seems far too self-indulgent, and it feels like there are a lot of things that were either edited or edited out of the film, or it just seems like, oh, we'll just have this as some kind of arty piece and people are meant to kind of piece it together themselves. But unfortunately, you know, unless you are in the know about what this director is trying to say, it falls short in that degree. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.